So thanks for joining us, everyone, and great pleasure to have you along again to the 5th instalment of the Angus Essentials webinar series. Pretty amazing to think that we're at the 5th instalment, so it's been going for 5 months and just a few to go. So without any further ado, we might get into it. Also, it's a great pleasure that I have tonight to be joined by Jen Pitt. Are you there, Jen?
Here, Jake. Thanks so much for having me, mate. You keep on saying it's your great pleasure, but it's actually mine.
Oh, very good. So, look, great for you to join us again. Jen's our Northern Development Officer based in Central Queensland. My name's Jake Phillips. I'm the Extension Manager for Angus Australia based in Narracourt in South Australia. Tonight, we've got our standard kind of presentation with a few educational videos and insights into some of the finer aspects of raising Angus cattle and working with Angus Australia. And tonight, we're going to be looking at the Angus Database, including Angus Select and the Angus Database search, and some of the pretty unique features that we have here at Angus Australia to work with. But just a reminder, we do still have a couple of Angus Essentials sessions coming up, webinars, and they're both going to be next month due to scheduling. So on the 8th of September, we have what is due to be a very popular webinar series. We're going to be joined by a number of industry experts around running a successful AI program, and there'll be something in there for everyone, whether it's your first time running an AI program or you've been doing it for a number of years. You'll certainly pick up some very good hints and tips out of that session that Jen will be facilitating. And then to round out the series for this year, we're going to have Diana Wood, our Manager of Marketing and Communications, join us with some guests, and she'll be talking about a guide to marketing and advertising with Angus Australia, including looking at putting catalogues together. So that's going to be a great session as well. But tonight we're going to talk about Angus Tech, and the first thing I'd probably just like to outline is the three kind of main components of what we call Angus Tech. And Angus Tech is referring to the software that we use, which is the online database. Now, the first part that we're not going to talk about at length tonight is called Angus Online. Now, what Angus Online is about is downloading some reports, being able to do transactions such as finding your billing information, updating some of your information in terms of your account and your membership, and it'll also show where things like your DNA testing status is up to. So we're not going to focus a lot on that tonight. We're going to focus more on the two other parts, which is Angus Select. And Angus Select is really a suite of tools available to you as cattle breeders and as Angus members to be able to improve ultimately your profitability, but it's around being able to find genetics within the Angus database that might suit your breeding objective, or even start to do some benchmarking around some of the size you might have been using, or also finding cattle throughout the broader database. And then the last part that we're going to talk about is the Angus Database search, which is effectively finding individuals or finding multiple cattle across the Angus database, of which there's a substantial amount of cattle on that database. So we're going to talk about those two, the second and third component there, at more length. The first part I just wanted to spend just a couple of minutes on was just because you're an Angus member doesn't actually mean that you're registered to use this software. Now, anyone can register for this, to use this software. It's free and you don't have to be a member. So many of the things that we're going to show you tonight over the next 40 or 50 minutes are going to be quite unique to being only be able to be viewed and utilised if you're a registered user. It's very simple. I'm going to show you how to do that in just a moment, but I just did want to put that little disclaimer in there to start with. Now, we would strongly encourage you to register as a user. Your contact details don't get used for marketing claims or anything like that. It's purely around a privacy issue that we don't want external people mining our database for your details, our members, and also for your animals unnecessarily. So there's a couple of levels of views. One is a very primary view, which the public can access, and one is a far more in-depth view, which includes multiple generations of pedigree, also some some of your membership details, including contact details, and also the ability to export some data into various formats. So just wanted to put that disclaimer in there to start with. So without any further ado, we might try and run this video, which is going to be showing us how to sign in to the Angus Tech database.
On the Angus Australia homepage, select Angus Tech at the top of the page. Scroll down to Angus Database Search, where you can enter in as either a guest or registered user. Entering in as a guest will not give you full access to the information within the database, and anyone can become a registered user and will gain access to all the features of the database. Members of Angus Australia will be able to use their 3-letter herd ID as their user ID and can contact member services if they're unsure of their password. The database will remember your login details for 30 days once the Remember My Details box has been checked. And users will need to agree to the terms and conditions of the database before entering. Once signed into the database, the name on the account will be visible in the top right-hand corner. If you've not registered for Angus Tech, you'll need to click Register here under the User ID box. Registering for Angus Tech is free and will require either a mobile phone number or email address to receive a verification code. It is recommended that users register with a mobile, as users registering with an email address will need to contact Angus Australia for a verification code. Once users have completed the other information required and clicked Register, a verification code will be sent. Once users have received the verification code, they'll need to click Verify My Account at the bottom of the page and select how they've received the code. Users will need to enter either the mobile phone number or email address used to register and the verification code received before clicking Verify My Account. Once the account has been verified, users will have full access to Angus Tech.
So there we go. That's just the first introduction to signing in, but more importantly to registering for Angus Tech. So the next segment that I wanted to touch on tonight was one of the first and maybe one of the simplest ways that you can use this database, and that's going to be using the Angus Database search. Before we have a look at this example, it was remiss of me not to mention right from the start as well, of course, if you've got any questions tonight, please pop them into the chat, as we normally do on the Angus Essentials webinar series. So please put them in there and we'll break periodically for questions, and certainly welcome discussion at the end.
Searching with an Angus Database search is simple, as users can look up individual animals or do searches based on criteria to identify groups of animals which meet their needs. Users are able to search the database based on animal name or animal ID, as well as NLAS details if they've been included in the database. When searching for an animal, users have the ability to use the is function if they know the full exact name of the animal, begins with if they know the start, such as the stud prefix, contains if they only know part of the animal's name, or ends with if they know the end of the animal's name. Users will need to select the function most appropriate to their information before typing the information into the relevant box and clicking the search button. When returning to the previous search, the database will remember the criteria you searched on, so users will need to click the Clear button before starting a new search. Users can search for multiple animals simply by putting a comma between the details they've entered. All the details entered will need to adhere to the same function. To search based on criteria such as breeding values, users will need to scroll down to the bottom of the page where they'll find the additional selection criteria. Under the heading of additional selection criteria, there are a number of tabs which contain the criteria that can be used to search the database. If the user has a herd linked to their Angus Tech account, they will have additional selection criteria under the Ownership tab, which they can search the database based on. To perform a search, simply navigate to the appropriate tab and enter the criteria you wish to search based on. When searching for EBVs, users can type in the exact breeding value they want to search based on, or use the percentile band, which will calculate the breeding value cutoff to meet the percentile band. Simply type the band in, either the minimum or maximum percentile band, and click off the box, and the database will calculate the minimum cutoff. Users can search based on multiple EBVs simply by adding criteria to the relevant box. Once all the criteria have been entered, users will need to click the search button at the bottom of the page to complete the search.
So there we go. There's the first example that we've had of finding individual animals where you know the identification, or you might know part of the ident or part of the name, and the options to be able to do that, as well as an example of using some of that additional search criteria. So we're going to get a little bit more complex as we get through tonight's presentation, and just wanted to start to showcase some of the more features, or some of the other features, I should say, that we have. So when you do a database search, this is a pretty typical display of what will come up within your search results. And this is a standard display. And I know that because in the top right-hand corner, you'll see a drop-down box called the default layout. So that's actually showing the standard EBVs and the standard layout for this particular user. And we'll talk about what we can do there in changing your standard view to suit your particular requirements a little bit later. If we just cast our eyes back to the left just to start with, typically the animals are displayed in ID order, and then by name, sex, sire and dam ID as well, and birth date, and then we get into the EBV traits and indexes. One of the unique features that I particularly like about the Angus database search is you'll notice on top of each one of those rows there is a little up and down arrow. It's very faint in grey, but that is actually a sort key. So if I clicked on one of those up or down arrows, it would actually sort into ascending or descending order, which for name and birth dates and things like that is probably okay and usable. But where I find it particularly usable is when we're starting to rank cattle by selection index or by a particular EBV. It allows the criteria to sort those cattle and to bring the highest or the lowest animal to the top. And that's particularly important when we're looking at search results that might involve several hundred cattle. So that's a particularly nice feature. You'll also find across the top that there's page numbers. So this particular example, there's the first page is highlighted, but we can also click through pages, and we're currently displaying 1 to 20, of which there's only 5 animals in this search, but we're particularly only showing those 20 search criteria, search outcomes. But that blue box, we can actually then click on the display 100 results per page, and that will display more cattle per page. And that might be similar to other search things that you are familiar with, such as even doing online shopping, and therefore it becomes a little bit more user-friendly. So that's all I just wanted to explain there, that it's really around a click and play, and I would encourage you that if you haven't used some of the features and buttons that are located on this page, certainly have a go in your own time, and we're going to showcase a few of those buttons as we go tonight. By clicking on what we call the ribbon, but clicking on the row of that first animal, anywhere on that row, a single left mouse click will actually drop down the additional information on that animal, and it always defaults to the summary page, which will have some of the breeding information associated with that animal, such as the sex and birth date and its identification, its registration status, if it's been genotyped as well as, and also displaying any of those genetic condition results for the 4 main genetic conditions that are reported standardly. Importantly, it does also then display the pedigree on both sides of the animal, displays the ownership, and then also gets into the EBVs into a table and a graph format. So that's pretty basic stuff. I nearly have the expectation that a lot of people on the webinar tonight will know how to do that. But if you don't, it's certainly going to be one of the first things that you do go about doing. So I suppose in addition, so the animals file will open onto that summary tab, like I've explained. But importantly, entering as a guest will not give you full access to the information within the database. And that comes back to the first point that I made right at the front of the webinar, was that to get this full access, particularly of the more in-depth information around pedigree and EBVs and the such, that importantly, you will need to register. Now, if that animal is listed for sale, we do allow that information to be displayed, because of course we don't want to be negating the opportunity for potential clients to find that information. But if that information is not, if that animal, I should say, is not listed for sale or have semen catalogued, then you will need to be registered to be able to view that information. Okay, so let's have a bit of a look at customizing that layout, and this brings a little bit more complexity, but as you get more used to using the Angus database, you'll certainly find some things that are more important to you than others. So let's have a look at how we go about customizing the layout.
The results of a search within Angus Tech will be returned with the default layout, which includes the animal ID, animal name, sire and dam ID, as well as a selection of selection indexes and breeding values. Users of Angus Tech can change the display of results by selecting one of the alternative layout options, which include the expanded layout, the animal details only layout, and the EBV only layout. Users of Angus Tech can create their own customised results layout by clicking the search option, Customise Results Layout. To add details to the layout, click and drag the criteria you wish to have included in the layout into the columns to be displayed in this layout box. A preview of the layout will be visible at the bottom of the page. You can adjust the order of the criteria simply by dragging and dropping within the box. Once you are happy with the layout, you will need to click Save Layout As and give the layout an appropriate name before clicking Save. When you search within Angus Tech, the customised layout, as well as the standard layouts, will be available in the drop-down box.
So that's just an example of what we can do in making a customised layout. And I'd suggest that that's probably the most useful when you might only have 3 or 4 or possibly 5 things that you're particularly interested in, and you want to start to declutter your search results and really identifying those things that are of most importance to you and your operation. The next thing we're going to look at is sorting the results a little bit more, and this is again starting to get us closer to getting your search results closer to what you really want, and that might be a certain sire or certain semen sire or certain cattle that you found within your herd or possibly for sale, and this is just getting us a little bit closer to getting those results exactly what you're after and getting away from the total field of possible results as well.
When you complete a search within Angus Tech, unless specified elsewhere, the database will sort animals by their animal ID. To sort by any of the other displayed criteria, simply click the arrows above the criteria title. To sort the alternate direction, click the arrows again. To do a more complex sort of results, from Angus Database Search, scroll down to Sort Criteria. Select the criteria you wish to sort by from the drop-down box. To add additional criteria, click the plus sign beside the row and select an additional criteria to sort by. If you select criteria not displayed by the layout you've selected, an additional column will be added displaying the criteria the results are being sorted by.
So there we go. That's a good example of what we've been talking about. And I might add, just out of particular interest, You might be looking at, say, current sires that have semen available and listed in an Angus semen sire catalogue, or you could potentially be looking at females within a herd and being able to put in that additional criteria and then sort by number of calves they had might be something that you're particularly interested in, to sort by the animals that have got the most calves on file and therefore registered. So that's just a particular example of where that can be used. Okay, so all of that's all well and good, but at some stage you're probably more than likely going to want to print some results. And I would also add that there is an export option into Microsoft Excel and also as a PDF. But generally, we find most of our members that do like to print their results at some stage, whether it's to enter into a bit of a discussion and debate around the kitchen table with their family, potentially taking the printout to the cattle yards or to the sale to further enhance their observations and refer back to. And this is a great example of how we can do that.
Produces an Excel document to print from Angus Tech. Select the search option, go to Report Center at the top of the page. The Report Center contains two types of reports: Generate Reports, which lets you pull data off the database, and Analyze Results, which lets you examine your search further. There are a number of options under Generate Report, depending on how you want your results printed. Search Results Listing PDF produces a PDF which lists with the default layout all animals in your previous search. Search Results Listing CSV produces an Excel document containing all the animals in your previous search with results displayed in your chosen layout. Detailed Animal Reports produces a one-page summary on all the animals in your previous search. There are three types of Detailed Animal Reports, depending on what information you want included in the one-page summary: Pedigree Only, Pedigree EBV, and Pedigree EBV and EBV Chart. The final option for printing is to print the animal's registration certificate. Importantly, animals will need to be registered to have a registration certificate generated. Once you've chosen your desired format for printing, right-click on the PDF and select Print.
So there you go. Some would say reasonably intuitive, but if you do, of course, run into any trouble at all trying to print reports, please contact us at Angus Australia and we'd be more than happy to assist you on your way. Okay, so let's have a bit of a deeper dive into some of the reports that we've got available. So the results summary report, and this is around the analysis. So this isn't just printing what you've searched, which is what the example we just went through. This is actually the option that was a little bit lower down on the page around analysing the search results. So the results summary report determines the average and minimum and maximum EBVs for the animals within the search and displays an EBV chart of the average. And we'll have a look at that in just a moment. The sire summary report looks at the size of the animals within the search and provides some basic details about the sire and number of progeny hairs represented in the search. And this is probably more relevant for potentially those larger herds where you've used a range of sires and you're trying to work out in a very quick method just how influential those sires have been over your herd in terms of number of calves registered. Another report that I quite like is the trait comparison report, and the trait comparison plots the animals within the search on a scatter plot, which is based on two traits, and we'll refer to that in just a moment and have a look at that in a bit more detail. And then we've got the trait distribution report, and that groups the animals within the search on a bar graph based on their EBV for a single trait, and we'll also have a look at that as well. And these are really good reports for potentially you've bought, say, for example, a couple of bulls or used a couple of AI size last year. You could actually put those animals into the search, pull up these reports and see what their average EBVs or trait distribution is, to see where the holes or the gaps might be in terms of your breeding objective for then therefore choosing size for this year. And that's just an example of how you can use these reports. So this is the trait distribution report, and as you can see there, it's got across that group of animals that you've actually put in. It's showing that that generally speaking, that's where the distribution across the carcass weight EBVs along the bottom is, and then highlighting those two animals, which we can click on the bar graph and it will tell you what animals are in those distributions. And it's really just another way to highlight what animals are sitting in the top thresholds, or I suppose in the top percentiles we refer to in EBVs for certain traits. It's just a graphical way of essentially displaying that information. This is the trait comparison report. So this might be, for example, quite important when you've got more than one trait that is particularly important. And I'm not sure if you can see that on your screens there tonight, everyone, but one of the traits we've got in there is IMF, or intramuscular fat. The other trait we've got in there is 400 day weight. And so this is essentially trying to identify those animals that are within a desired range. And I'm assuming the desired range is of a higher percentile for both traits. And this might be a particularly good piece of technology to use when you're looking at traits that may in fact at times be antagonistic, and it helps to identify those animals. So you might be able to have, say, birth weight or calving ease and growth, or you might be able to have IMF and eye muscle area and so on. So it's a great example of how we can find animals that are desirable to your breeding objective for more than one trait. We might just pause there just quickly, Jen, if there's any questions in the chat. Otherwise, we'll keep powering on.
No questions so far, Jake, but as Jake mentioned earlier, pop your questions in the chat, or there's a Q&A section. You can also alternatively raise your hand, but yeah, just keep them coming through, and yeah, we'll endeavour to do our best to answer them.
Thanks, Jen. Excellent. So what we're going to get into now is we've spoken about the Angus search features, and look, they're reasonably intuitive. I would certainly encourage you to get on and have a go, plug and play. You can't break anything in there, so please get on and tell us what you think, and if you're having any trouble, contact us. What we're going to go through now is Angus Select, and Angus Select is around selecting animals to potentially meet your breeding objective. And there's all sorts of things in Angus Select. There's looking across sale catalogues, there's looking across semen catalogues, there's also finding members, there's also finding bulls that have been nominated and are being used in the Angus Eye benchmarking program. So let's have a bit of a look at Angus Select. I've just stolen my own thunder there, but these are the 5 main categories that we're going to have a brief look at tonight. With the exclusion of embryos for sale, we don't have an example of that tonight, but it works in much the same fashion. So this is a bit of an overview of Angus Select, and is a great way to kick off this segment. So it's just a great overview to start Angus Select, and we're going to have a look at the demonstration now of looking for an individual.
From the Angus Australia website, we're going to go to Angus Select. And then we're going to look across this individual search across the catalogues about animals for sale. And displayed will be the upcoming sales that are registered with Angus Australia, of which there are plenty at the moment coming into spring. And we can choose any of these by clicking the drop down box and going show all the lots, and these will then be displayed in lot order. Of course, we can sort these cattle registered for sale by any of these traits across the top by clicking on the up and down arrows. So for example, we're going to click on the $A index to sort them, which will then be displayed in the highest ranking indexing animal in that particular sale. And to look at the individual animals, again, we can click anywhere across that bar and it will bring up the individual information on that animal. Once we've gone through the individual animals, we can also then click on these boxes here to then only display those animals. So if we then click on this show only selected animals, this will then leave us with only our selections. We can then go to the report center. We can analyze these results as well as generate reports. Analyzing the results could be of interest. So with a results summary, this is then across those 4 bulls that we've chosen, the average EBVs for those animals, and that would give you a pretty good indication of what the genetic merit or EBVs are likely to be for those 4 animals that you've chosen, and you can then make some assumptions on whether that will match your breeding objective and selection criteria.
So it's just another way to look through an individual sale catalogue, and looking through an individual semen catalogue would be done in much the same way. We're going to also have a look at looking across multiple catalogues at the same time tonight.
From the Angus Australia website, we're going to go to Angus Select.
I think we had a double up there, sorry. Anyway, so we're going to look at searching across multiple catalogues now. So this is a great example of, let's say that you're in a particular area, let's say on the north coast of New South Wales, or you're in the southeast of South Australia, and realistically you have a pretty strong desire to look for cattle that are for sale in your reasonably local area for just convenience in terms of potentially getting that bull home. This will allow you to do that. It will also allow you to select sales across New Zealand and Australia, and there's a couple of very unique features that we've got built into this which we're about to showcase. Now, the other thing that we've got as part of this example is around a breeding objective, and we've spoken about breeding objectives back in earlier versions and the series of this webinar series, and we're going to showcase these additional search criteria function as part of this particular example. So for someone that, say, might have a breeding objective of effectively breeding for profit, which is a fairly common part of the breeding objective, this particular producer that we're going to showcase is going to use the Angus breeding index of the 50th percentile or greater. And so what will be displayed is no cattle that will have a selection index lower than the 50th percentile. They also want to maintain their calving ease direct in their 2-year-old heifers. And so we're going to be placing some emphasis on calving ease direct, and that's going to be at the 50th percentile as well. And we also, this particular producer is going to be looking at increasing their weaning weight, their 200-day weight EBVs. They're going to be used to be able to do that and meet that production goal. And so they're going to be placing those into the 40th percentile. Docility is going to be placed in as the 50th percentile to maintain at least a breed average type approach to docility. And for IMF, they've got a desire to increase the IMF in their cattle, and they'll be showcasing the additional search criteria and placing in the 40th percentile for IMF EBV.
From the Angus Australia homepage, we're going to click on Angus Select. We're now going to look across multiple catalogues at the one time. For this example, we're going to go to Angus Select. We should then bring up a drop-down box for sale, which we can click on sales that we would like to look across. These are all the registered bull sales and female sales at the moment. Alternatively, we can also go to the show map, which will bring up a map of Australia. We can then zoom in by using the zoom buttons, and let's, for example, suggest that we are based in the Albury region and we would like to only look in that area out of convenience, and so we choose the 3 closest sales to Albury. We then scroll back to the top and the sales that we have chosen are listed in these sale boxes. We can then go to proceed to animal selection criteria, and we're looking across those 3 sales that we've identified just geographically are convenient. We're then also going to place some EBV criteria in. Again, we're going to start with the Angus breeding index, and we're going to suggest that we're only looking at animals in the top 50th percentile. So we put a 50 in here for the minimum selection criteria on that index. We can also use the drag bar here, the slide bar, to identify where we'd like that index to sit, and that's available on all of the traits. Calving ease is part of our breeding objective for this example. Calving is direct, and that will need to be in the top 50th percentile as well. 200-day growth, we would like to be in the top. We would like that to be in the top 40th percentile, and we're also going to say that they need to be in the 50th percentile or at least breed average for docility, and we're also going to say that they need to be in the top 40th percentile for IMF. So for our breeding objective, we've placed in some calving ease emphasis, some 200-day growth emphasis, some docility emphasis, and IMF emphasis, as well as making sure that only animals in the top 50th percentile or greater are displayed for the Angus breeding index. We're then going to click search. This will then search across the 3 sale catalogues that we have put in, and we've identified 18 bulls on this occasion that suit our breeding objective criteria. We can then look across these animals and we can see that there are animals displayed out of the different sales. And again, I would suggest that we can then scroll across to the right, click on the $A index for this particular example, rank them from the highest indexing animal to the lowest, and we can then go about looking at the individual animals based on pedigree, genetic condition status, and also EBVs as to how they would select and meet our criteria. Then again, we can go across and click on these boxes, go to only show selected animals, to the report center, and for this occasion we may print the detailed animal reports, including pedigree and EBVs, with the report running, which will then pop up for us. And we could then print these off for further discussion with the family or colleagues. We could then take these to the bull sale to make notes, or may just be a nice report to be able to refer to for your next part of the criteria in selecting the bulls and genetics which are going to meet your breeding objective for this breeding season. From on the Angus Australia homepage, we're going to click on Angus Select. We're now going to look across multiple catalogues at the one.
Sorry, we just got a little lag in the technology tonight. Must be the Narracort weather at the moment. One of the parts that that we did want to highlight as part of that Angus Sales Select feature is that we also do have the ability to select sales by country. So we do have a number of sales throughout the year that are listed in New Zealand. And so if this is of interest to you, and that will be mainly our members and followers in New Zealand, but we can actually select on that initial page where we access the map, and just on that second drop-down box, we can actually choose by country. So the search we did was across both countries in that example, but we can also choose just Australia or just New Zealand, which is really only going to probably be relevant to our New Zealand members. Okay, so now we're going to have a demonstration looking across multiple semen catalogues. And there's one key difference in this particular example is that we'll also display, if you don't put in that additional search criteria and you just want to look across all semen catalogues or all sale catalogues with no additional criteria, I just want to highlight it can be quite a task how many animals actually come up. So in our semen catalogues at the moment, we have more than 200 registered Angus sires with semen available. Now, it's a fair chance not all of those are going to meet your breeding objective. And so just wanted to reiterate the importance of putting in some of that additional criteria to be able to make your task about finding your next sire just that little bit more easier.
For this example, we're going to go to Angus Select, and we're going to look across multiple sale catalogues. But in this example, we're going to look across multiple semen catalogues, which is Angus Semen Select. Now, because these don't have a specific location and largely are marketed online, we can actually choose individual catalogues that we would like to look across. Or, if we like, we can actually proceed to sire selection across all catalogues. Of the more than 200 Angus sires registered with semen for sale through these catalogues, we can now place some Ebv criteria. So let's use the same criteria that we used previously in the sales select when looking across multiple sale catalogues. We're going to place a 50th percentile emphasis on the Angus breeding index for this example, and you may have other objectives that are more important to you. We're going to also place a 50th percentile emphasis on calving is direct. We're going to place a 40th percentile on 200-day growth EBV. We're going to place a 50th percentile on the docility EBV. And we're going to place a 40th percentile on the IMF EBV. We're then going to search across all sale catalogues. This has displayed 24 bulls that currently meet our objective. We can then, by clicking on any of the animals, bring up the extra information available through their registration details, their ownership, pedigree, EBVs, selection indexes, and any genetic conditions results, as well as photos and videos. As an example, if we go back to our search criteria, where we have placed in the EBVs, we clear these, and now we're going to search across all of those semen catalogues without any additional search criteria. What we will then find is that we now have 268 results. So this is an example of where placing in that additional search criteria will certainly speed up your process and get you closer to finding the sires that will meet your breeding objective this breeding season. For this
Okay, so I think that is a pretty good summary of Angus Sales Select, Jen, and I'm not sure if you had anything further to add there. Please pipe in if you do, but there's a whole range of features when searching for cattle for sale or for genetics. And it would really be a multi-day webinar for us to display all of those features. But hopefully that's just a nice, neat way, an example of finding cattle that potentially might be for sale. Just before I move on from there, because the next part of Angus Select that I'm going to show you, and we've only got a few minutes to go, but is around the ASBP and then also Member Select. So we are moving away from some of what we have shown tonight. Did I notice that there was a question in the chat, Jen? Is that something we can address now, or are there any other questions before we move into the last segment?
Yes, so we have a question from Mark. Mark, welcome back. Great to see you back online again. He has asked, are there specific marketing packages for members to advertise cattle either as a sale or individual animals?
Yes, there is, Mark. Yes, that's a great question. Certainly we can put you in touch offline with the right people. If you go to the Angus Australia website, though, as well, there is under marketing, there's a tab marketing on the homepage, and there's a whole array of information there that includes also some of the agreements that need to go into place, but also it clearly points out how you go about getting an individual animal for sale or multiple animals for sale, just to be listed online. And we also do provide a cataloguing service where we provide genetic information on your pedigrees and EBVs through to full catalogue design. And Diana Wood's going to talk about that at the end of September in the last of the webinar series. So please don't miss that one. That sounds like it's going to be really relevant to you. But in the meantime, if you would like us to put you in touch with the right person, if that's something you're interested in, we can certainly do that as well.
Of course, and so yeah, as Jake said, most of the marketing done through Angus Australia via the catalogue service, which is they charge a per head fee, like per lot fee, and then depending on how customised the catalogue is, sort of dictates some of the costs, and so that's all published on our website. As for other marketing arrangements, there are plenty, but you are speaking to extension staff, and our marketing gurus are going to be the subject of not next webinar, the webinar after. So as Jake said, yeah, if you have any questions about this in the meantime, get in touch, otherwise tune in.
Excellent. Thanks, Jen. Is there one last question there before we move on to Angus Select for the ASBP?
Oh, it's just Mark saying he'll will look into it further.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
excellent.
Awesome.
So just quickly on the ASBP, which is the Angus Sire Benchmarking Program, this is a program that's now been running for more than 10 years at Angus Australia, and it is the leading, in our opinion, but certainly would be regarded by many in industry as one of the leading, if not the best reference population within Australia for Angus cattle. And what that's about is we mate somewhere between 1,000 up to 2,000, but normally a bit over 1,000 females a year to between 20 and 40 registered Angus bulls. And the progeny from those animals are actually what we call intensively recorded. And that means that there's fertility traits at mating, all the calving traits, all the growth traits, right through to the steer progeny being put into a feedlot, and all of the then carcass traits then measured on those animals. And the female progeny actually kept and monitored again all the way through to the weaning of their first calf. And excitingly, at the moment, we're now including things like measuring methane emissions and some of the more relevant traits to the future as well. So we have this incredible reference and resource within the Angus breed. And excitingly for Angus members, we have this Angus ASBP, and we have the ability to search through the different sires using Angus Select, and you'll be able to pull up what bulls are in what cohort, and also see how their EBVs are tracking once that intensively measured information keeps getting included into the different TACE evaluations as time goes on, and it's a great way to be able to see what sires are really being used to benchmark the breed. So the last segment that I wanted to talk about, which could be the most important one, is actually called Member Select. And that's actually how you can find other Angus members that may have cattle for sale or that you may want to engage with. But importantly, I'm also going to give you a demonstration around making sure that your membership information is true and correct and is actually displayed as you would like it on the Angus Australia database. And what I mean by that is a lot of your information is actually defaulted to not be displayed to the public, and that is around privacy of your information, around contact information, your address, phone number, email, so on and so forth. But also, I suppose I would acknowledge that one of the best ways for people to contact you to discuss about your cattle, particularly if you've got cattle for sale, is by having your contact information available to them. And I'm going to show you how you can check that in this next example.
To ensure that the details you wish to be publicly displayed are, you can simply go to your name at the top of the bar, click on the drop-down box and go to My Herd Details. You will then be presented with a range of tabs across the top to which you can go through and ensure that the details being displayed are correct, including your name, your postal address details, property address details, any social media accounts and handles that you wish to be contacted by, and then importantly, the privacy tab. The privacy tab has these check boxes on the right hand side, which you can simply check or uncheck to then create the publicly displayed listing. After you've gone through all of the different details that you wish to be displayed and click the checkbox, you can then click on Update Privacy Preferences. And this will come up with a pop-up box saying the privacy preferences for this account have been updated. If you currently don't have your details displayed in the public domain and you wish to, this is how you do it.
So hopefully that's a helpful hint to be able to update your privacy information. So just finally as well, all of the examples that we have used tonight have got references as part of our education centre, including online tutorials. and most of the videos that we showed will be located on there as well. So the three boxes along the bottom there are the tabs that we've been talking about tonight, and that is Angus Database Search, Angus Select, and Angus Online, and that's located in that same education centre area that other things that you would no doubt have visited, such as understanding EBVs and collection guidelines for taste, are located. So there's plenty of information there. But of course, if you have any trouble, please contact staff at Angus Australia, and we would be more than delighted to be able to help. Now, is there any questions there, Jen? Otherwise, we might march on to our poll, which is incredibly important as well.
No questions, Jake. Just a comment from me. So one of the other things that Jake has done a great job of illustrating how you get your details to be viewable on Member Select. And I guess I'd just like to add a bit of weight to that, saying that like so much of the traffic that Jake and I get from like just the general public inquiring about where to source Angus animals and people in their area, a lot of that comes through Member Select, and so I guess that I just wanted to urge you. It's an opt-in system, so you're not by default displayed, and the amount of business that Jake and I see go through Member Select can't be understated. And the other thing is that, Jake, if a person is breeding for specific environments, and obviously Queensland's very close to my heart, so this is a bit of a loaded question from my side, but is it possible for people to search by research breeding values with the likes of coat type, and that's a thing from both semen and physical animal sale catalogues?
Yes, absolutely, and I'm glad you brought that up. So just to rehash what research breeding values are, they're not currently part of that standard display of which we use tonight in a few examples, but they're traits that we're collecting data on, and we'll have an EBV in time. And one of those additional selection criteria tabs, which was the one next to EBVs, includes research breeding values, and that could be something like coat type. There's also could be something like mature cow body composition, or a trait like that. I would also say that even though we can search on it, at times it will be on a smaller pool of cattle, because most of those research breeding values do require people to have submitted actual traits for those particular, or observations, I should say, for those particular traits. And because they're still reasonably new, we don't have as many cattle that have those EBVs displayed. But certainly that example of being in Queensland is a fantastic one. The other one that you can do, other than our map, and it could even just be looking for members that you could contact privately to talk about cattle, or potentially cattle for sale, is on that Member Select feature. You can also choose members that are located in a certain postcode range. So you could search. There's a few different postcode variations across New South Wales. There's a couple in Queensland, and so you could actually really refine what members you might like to call up and see if they had bulls for sale or whatever it might be privately. And that's another way that you could also hone in on location in terms of obviously the traits that we spoke about, but also where the member's located.
Yeah, it's very true. We have another question here. Oh, it's Mark saying, thank you very much for tonight, Jake. As usual, some very helpful information. Great to build knowledge each session. Thank you so much, Mark. We very much appreciate your attendance.
No, that's fantastic, Mark. I'm not sure you've missed one, Mark. So we're delighted you get the. I'm not sure if anyone else has been on every one, but you certainly have, and we really appreciate the engagement, Mark. So thank you. I suppose we're certainly around for more questions, but we do have the poll tonight, Jen. Now this is really critical to our feedback to allow us to make these things better for next time, but it also gives us the best chance of being able to run these types of events into the future, because we go a lot on what our members and what our audience how much value they're getting out of these and how likely they are to be able to improve the things they're doing because we've put on these types of events. So we would really appreciate if you could just place your assessments into that poll. That would be fantastic. And of course, if there's any more questions, we're certainly around. But I do have a sense that what we've shown tonight will really only sink in once you actually start to investigate what parts of that technology suit you the best. There's certainly things that Jen uses in her line of work and probably also out of work that don't necessarily align to what I use every day. And that's the great feature about the software, is that we can actually set up our personal views and how we utilize the software to suit what we're doing at that particular time, whether it be searching for particular bulls across sale catalogues or semen catalogues, whether it be trying to find a certain member's details because we want to go and visit them, so on and so forth. There's just so much information and power within that database. So that's fantastic.
I have to say, when you mentioned about printing out the detailed PDF for the family to debate, that really hit close to home, Jake. There's lots of heated conversations around the Pitt dining table over those sheets. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear. Excellent.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Jake is saying, that there's so much functionality built into this platform, and it's sort of something that you won't really realise until you start using. And yeah, Jake, just if you're ever having trouble, pick up the phone. Jake and I are always happy and willing to step you through, and once it becomes second nature, there's so much power in some of the functionality. So yeah, don't ever hesitate to ring.
Excellent. No worries. Well, unless there's any more questions, I think we might call that a night. We've been going for just over the hour. And just a reminder that in a couple of weeks' time, on the 8th of September, Jen, you've got some industry experts and you'll be hosting some hints and tips on running a successful AI program. So looking forward to hearing all about that as well.
Come along. There's some really quite amazing people in their field that you'll be just sort of invaluable for you to pick their brains. Like, even if you're an old hand, you never know what you might pick up. And if you're new, this will be a great place to start. So please come and join us. That'd be great.
Excellent. No worries. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone. And look forward to talking to you at some stage or seeing you out on the road, and enjoy your Friday and importantly your weekend. And we'll see you again next month for Angus Essentials.
Thanks, Jake. Thanks for having us.